Today's Living Local Carolina is sponsored by Carolina Trust Federal Credit Union.
Oh, there's something so real about living local, about the people and the places where we live. Just look at all the reasons why we call this home. And I'm loving living local. I'm living local 'cause it's where I love to be.
Good morning, you're watching the Living Local Carolina Financial Friday Community Panel, and I'm August, Carolina Trust Brand Ambassador. Today we are going to be talking about hurricane season. And as you guys know, living here at the beach, we are in hurricane season for 6 months out of the year. So I have brought some very special guests on to kind of help me out. We've got Frank, who is our Chief Meteorologist here at the News 13 station, and Aaron Clay, who is a captain with the Myrtle Beach Fire Department. So, of course, you guys have very hands-on experience when it comes to hurricane season, one of your busier times for sure. So what are some things that people at home should know about, I guess, our climate specifically, and what makes Myrtle Beach such a prime area for hurricanes?
Well, I think as far as what people should know is you need to prepare for hurricanes before they're on the way.
Right.
Because you don't want to be, as the hurricane's bearing down, trying to decide what you want to do.
Right.
And here in South Carolina, hurricanes form over warm tropical water. They need that warm summertime water in the tropics to get their energy. And here in the Carolinas, we're right there on the ocean.
Right.
So we're right where the hurricanes form.
Perfect. And I know, with our weather kind of being more of a tropical climate with the warmth, like you were talking about in the water, we see lots of different tropical storms and other kinds of inclement weather throughout hurricane season that may not classify as a full hurricane. Can you kind of explain the difference in, a tropical storm and a hurricane and maybe just a really bad thunderstorm so that people understand, what a true hurricane is and what it takes to get all the way up to that point?
Hurricanes usually start as tropical waves that come off of Africa.
Okay.
Most hurricanes start that way, and almost all of our major hurricanes start that way.
Okay.
Tropical wave is just a cluster of thunderstorms that forms over the rainforest in Africa,
Yeah.
moves out over the ocean. If it starts to rotate and develop an area of low pressure, it becomes a tropical depression.
Okay.
If it continues to strengthen, and it's getting its energy from the very warm tropical Atlantic Ocean temperatures.
Yeah.
If it continues to strengthen, it becomes a tropical storm.
Okay.
And once tropical storms get up to 74 mile per hour sustained winds, they're classified as hurricanes.
Gotcha. So with hurricanes, of course, there are many different stages of a hurricane. When it reaches that 75 mile per hour winds, that's when a hurricane's like officially named. And then how do we go from when we get there to determine what stage it's going to hit here on landfall? And, in that process where we're kind of sitting and waiting and watching.
And that's what we really have to watch for. Keep in tune to the forecasts. Some hurricanes, well, all hurricanes are going to be dangerous.
Right.
But there's a big difference between Hurricane Matthew,
Yeah.
which caused a lot of damage along the Grand Strand,
Right.
6 years ago,
Yeah.
and Hurricane Hugo,
Yeah.
which was a major hurricane that caused catastrophic damage across the Carolinas. So that's what we really want to keep an eye on, the forecast, how strong is the storm is going to get. And when you're making your plan of what you're going to do, if you're going to evacuate, how you're going to prepare, that needs to be part of your plan. Am I going to stay and ride out a Category 1, but do I run away from a Category 3?
Right.
Those are the things you need to decide now. And, we don't want to freak anyone out, especially new people to this area. We average a hurricane along the Grand Strand once every 8 years.
Okay.
We average a major hurricane once every 23 years.
Okay.
The last several years, the last 8 years, we have had officially within 50 miles of Myrtle Beach,
Yeah.
we've had 4 hurricanes.
Okay.
So that's 4 over 8 years, where we normally average 1 per 8 years. So
Yeah.
we're kind of ahead of schedule. But we haven't really had an impactful major hurricane since Hurricane Hugo.
Yeah.
Technically, Hurricane Fran in '96 came within 50 miles of Myrtle Beach. And just a few years ago, Hurricane Dorian was a Category 3 off of Charleston. It was just
Right.
outside of that 50-mile buffer.
Yeah.
But it's really been a long time since we've had a big one.
Yeah, and it, like you said, we average one every 8 years, and I feel like here the past few years, everybody's been buckled down, like, what are we going to get this year, And I think it was super important that you mentioned at the beginning that the key to being prepared is to prepare now before there was ever a hurricane site. So both of you, what are some things people can do at home to go ahead and start preparing now? What are things that they need and they should go ahead and get together to make sure that if a hurricane arises, that their family is safe?
So people need to start going out in their yards now and kind of doing a pre-assessment of their house and their yard, their trees, their shrubs, all these things that can create projectiles and high winds per se. We're at the beach, everyone has umbrellas and chairs on their decks and patios. You don't want to be trying to put those away 35 minutes before storms come in and things are flying everywhere. It makes it a little difficult.
Right.
You have previous damage to your roof, go ahead and try to get that taken care of. Get the limbs trimmed. You see limbs up in your tree, look a little dead, have someone come out and get them taken care of. Things of that nature. So, and like you said, preparing, you always want to have a hurricane preparedness kit on hand, which I know we're going to get into.
Yeah, we're going to get into our hurricane preparedness kit when we come back from the break. Welcome back to the Living Local Carolina Financial Friday Community Panel. Before the break, we were talking with Frank and Aaron about different ways that you can prepare for hurricane season. So Aaron has brought some different items from a hurricane preparedness kit to go over with us today. But before we do, we want to dive in on some of the other things that you can go ahead and get together now that aren't necessarily in your kit to make sure you're prepared for a hurricane or any other natural disaster. So we were talking before the break about, making sure that you're kind of keeping a survey of different items around your home that could cause damage during a hurricane. And we want to touch base on, making sure you have your important documents and things like that. And you were saying you have a nifty tool that you can kind of keep all those together.
Yeah, so I actually have a fireproof, waterproof bag that I keep in the house. Has all my documents, the kids' birth certificates, and important information. So we actually got this in case the house catches on fire. It's something that we can grab to get out of the house.
Yeah.
But on the same aspect, if you need to evacuate for a hurricane, you're not running around through your filing cabinets and through this drawer and that drawer looking for documents. They're in one nice place, ready to go for you. On top of that, we also have the preparedness kit, that is what I like to call it, which is normally stored in a really sturdy box. Some people don't like big bulky boxes, so they like to kind of have this here and there, but it's still things you want to keep at home on hand. One of the most important things is water. So everyone goes out and buys bottled water, but this little thing right here, it collapses down, and it's something that you can fill up with your tap water at the last minute. It's super cheap. You can get a couple of them, and it takes up no room when you're not using them. One of my other kind of important things that I find is this little weather radio. Information is knowledge, and knowledge is power. So you want to have this. It's not battery operated. It actually winds up with a little handle that powers it. And then you have a little solar panel on top, and you can also charge your cell phone and all these other things. So it kind of keeps you in the know with the weather radio, what's going on, is it safe to go outside, where are we at in the point of the storm and all of that. And then a couple of little odds and ends here, some toiletries you want to have, Clean Freak dry shampoo. It's get you by for a couple of days if you don't have any running water. And then, everyone has canned goods, but most people have battery operated can openers. So, why not just get a regular handheld one to keep in there? And then, of course, your first aid kit and a flashlight, duct tape, and, some more toiletry items. So duct tape fixes many, many things. It's probably one of the most versatile tools anyone could ever have. So that's kind of a breakdown. We have a whole list on our fire department Facebook page. And, it's kind of what you find important, but these things are kind of life-saving type deals. So
yeah, perfect. And I've got the printed out copy right here, and I noticed one of the things that you have on here is cash. So that's another good thing to note, whether you're planning to ride out the storm or you're planning to evacuate. Making sure that you have access to finances is super important. You never know how a storm can come through and cause difficulties, within your financial institution as far as connectivity to their servers, things like that. So making sure that you have a way to access finances during a difficult time, like a hurricane or any other natural disaster, is, super important. So we've got kind of our toolkit, I guess, in preparation for a storm that you can go ahead and put together at home now. What are some things that people should do when we've heard from our meteorologist that a storm is on the way to prepare? I know I consider us very lucky that at least we're in an area to where these storms don't typically just pop up out of nowhere. We have a day's time most of the times to kind of get some things together. So when you're in that waiting period, what are some things that you should do to prep for the storm?
Have a plan. Have a plan and have a backup plan. If you're planning on going out of town and evacuating 3 days early, I know one year a bunch of people went to Disney.
Yeah.
And they kind of used it as a little vacation.
Right.
The problem is because so many people on the East Coast went to Disney, Disney became overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So you got to have a backup plan.
Right.
Do you have family that's 2 hours away? They're not, too far away, but they're also not close enough to be affected by the storm. So you got to have a plan and also have a backup plan.
Yeah.
And do what emergency management does. If you're on the coast and your zone is evacuated,
Right. Evacuate.
Don't try to ride out the storm if you're in an evacuation zone.
Right. Yeah, we don't want an incident within an incident.
Right.
So, and your safety and your health is paramount and the number one priority. So.
Right. And for those that are planning to kind of ride out the storm, we can talk about some different ways that you can prepare to do that when we come back from the break. Welcome back to the Living Local Carolina Financial Friday Community Panel, where today we are talking about hurricane preparation. So before the break, we were going over different ways to kind of put together your hurricane preparedness kit and how to prepare if you are planning to evacuate. But I think it's also super important for us to touch on, how to prepare if you are deciding to kind of ride out a storm and, be there with your home and your belongings if you do decide to stay. So what are some different tips that you can suggest to viewers at home that do decide to stay during a storm and how they can keep themselves and their family safe?
Like we talked about earlier, have a plan and have a backup plan. It kind of goes for the same aspect that if you're going to stay at home and ride out the storm,
yeah.
Be prepared to board up your windows.
Yeah.
Don't make it a last minute thing trying to go out and buy lumber because everyone's trying to buy lumber.
Right.
Lumber becomes a hot commodity during hurricanes.
Yeah.
Like we talked about, preparing your house, preparing your yard, preparing the trees in your yard, all of those good things. You also want to make sure you have communication with friends and family that are not around. Let them know what you're doing, and I'm going to contact you at this time after the storm. And you also want to pay attention to your local emergency weather radio broadcast. What are they telling you? Where can you go? Do you need a shelter in place? A lot of time in major disasters, the local government will put out a curfew, so that's something you need to keep in mind and be safe. And not only that, but unless your home becomes uninhabitable, it's better to just stay at home because local emergency responders and all the agencies are out trying to get us back to a normal state of operation.
Yeah.
And the more people in the roads wanting to go look at everything, it makes it harder for us to do our job.
Right.
And like we talked about earlier, an incident within an incident, we try to minimize that as much as possible. And the more people out moving around, the more chances of there being multiple incidents within an incident.
Yeah.
So we're very saturated as it is, and we just want everyone to stay at home and be safe until we can kind of get things back to some normalcy.
Yeah, I agree, and I think safety is the number one concern.
And prepare for worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And especially with regard to electricity, be prepared to be without electricity for a week or two. Even with a minimal hurricane or a tropical storm, all it takes is a few trees knocked down and you're without power.
Right.
So that means no hot showers, not being able to cook food. With regard to finances, not being able to use credit cards.
Right.
So that's why we encourage cash.
Yeah, that is such a great point to make sure that in any kind of event that prepare for the worst but hope for the best. Right. And when these storms are kind of coming through our area, aftermath is a big issue for us. I know with several of our recent hurricanes, there have been lots of flooding and debris. How can people, kind of prepare themselves and make sure that they are staying safe once a hurricane has passed through our area.
If we have a big storm, a catastrophic storm that causes a lot of structural damage, the authorities, the police, the emergency people that are here are going to require people returning home to prove they live where they say they live. So you want some sort of ID that has your address, whether it's your driver's license, an electric bill, something that has your physical address that proves that you belong where you say you're going.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know we do that at the credit union with all of our employees, so it's super important to make sure that that's something you have in hand. I guess when it comes to, you know, power outages, you hear a lot of different generator safety issues post-storm, as well as, you know, I hear all the time, you know, when you're not supposed to drive through, there's that little catchy saying where you don't drive through the water. But, you know, different things like that that people need to, if they do have to get out after a storm, that they need to know in order to be safe.
Well, one thing with the generators you're discussing is, you know, if you're going to run a generator and it's not a standby generator that's actually affixed to a location outside of your house, you need to have carbon monoxide detectors, you know, in your house. People tend to leave the windows open, and then the exhaust from the generator tends to want to waft into the house. So you want to be safe on that aspect. Have a licensed professional hook it up, and don't wait till a week before the storm, because unfortunately a lot of people do that, and then there's not even materials in the area to get your generator hooked up.
Right.
So you don't want to wait till the last minute on that either. And never, never, never run your generator in your garage trying to keep it out of the rain, because you are literally asking for a recipe for disaster. So.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, both so much for all of the advice and tips for people at home on how to stay safe for storms. And thank you both for your service to our community during hurricane times. We are very appreciative. Thanks so much for watching the Living Local Carolina Financial Friday Community Panel.